All right, good afternoon, everybody. Very, very pleased that the council has just passed with unanimous support Bill 424, establishing the Community Reinvestment and Repair Fund Commission. Yay, yay, yay. So I really want to thank council members Jawando and Sales for their leadership on this and their partnership as they were co-lead sponsors of this legislation. And huge thanks to the community members and the advocates who worked on the state legislation that really created this opportunity and who worked very closely with us in the drafting of this bill from start to finish, including Racial Justice Now, ACLU of Maryland, and Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. Just over a year ago, cannabis was legalized for adult use and sale in Maryland. In addition to being an important change for reasons of justice, health, and public safety, the creation of this new industry comes with tremendous economic benefits for new business owners and for the economic development of our state overall. Governor Moore announced earlier this month that total medical and adult use retail sales surpassed $1.1 billion in the first 12 months following legalization. The state also recognized that for the same actions that are now generating wealth for others, for decades, there have been communities, disproportionately Black communities, being criminalized and torn apart. And that was not by coincidence. That was a deliberate political strategy. In a 1994 interview, the Nixon administration's domestic affairs advisor, John Ehrlichman, stated that the drug war was intentionally designed to target critics of the administration in both the anti-war movement and the Black community. So, taking this into account, in an effort led by Senator Jill Carter and community advocates, when the state legislature legalized cannabis, they also created Maryland's Community Reinvestment and Repair Fund. 35% of revenues from the state sales tax on adult use cannabis gets put into that state fund. And those funds are then to be split amongst Maryland jurisdictions proportionate to the rate at which their residents faced prosecution for cannabis possession charges. Each county is responsible for distributing those funds to community-based organizations and efforts serving communities most impacted by the disproportionate enforcement of the cannabis prohibition. And that's where today's Bill 424 comes in. So in drafting this bill, we recognize that it would be inappropriate for a government office to take the lead in deciding how this money is distributed. Impacted communities must take the lead. So this legislation establishes a Community Reinvestment and Repair Commission made up of community members who will make annual recommendations about how to grant out our county's share of the state fund, which currently looks to be approximately $1 million per year. As we seek to pay reparations for historically racist drug enforcement policies and move forward together towards a more just future, I look forward to getting these funds moving into the communities for whom they are due. I appreciate my colleagues for their support of this important effort, and I look forward to the county executive signing the bill into law. And I'm pleased to be joined today by my colleagues, Councilmembers Will Jawando and Lorianne Sales. We're also joined by Hashim Jabbar, Co-Executive Director of Racial Justice Now, Yannette Emanuel, Public Policy Director of the ACLU of Maryland, and Courtney Hall, Executive Director of Interfaith Works. We'll hear now from Councilmember Will Jawando.
Thank you for that polite clap. Just really want to thank Councilmember Mink and her team for her leadership on this legislation, Councilmember Sales for her partnership, and for the community members who were right there saying, no, this word, that word, this line, that line, this is how we need to implement it. Anything that's supposed to repair harm that was done to our communities has to be community-led. And I'm really proud that the process that went into both the drafting of the legislation at the state level, but also the implementation in the various counties has gone that way. And that is our full intention with the commission that will make recommendations on how to spend this $1 million per year to begin a drop in the bucket of repair and movement in the right direction. I think it's important to acknowledge that the severe level of harm that has been done over many, many, many decades, and that this will not fix it. but it is a signal and an important signal that we are moving in a direction towards understanding the harm that was done and saying that now something that is legal and profitable, as Councilmember Mink mentioned, of $1.1 billion just last year alone, that we're going to take a very small portion of that and try to begin to repair and invest and reinvest in communities that have been harmed. I mentioned when we just passed the bill that it's, I think, very auspicious that we're passing this bill just about a month after the governor, Wes Moore, pardoned 175,000 Marylanders who had simple drug possession or paraphernalia possession. One of the many reasons that people that look like me, Black young men, I think I'm still kind of young, have disproportionately, we are in the state that has the highest incarceration rate for young Black men, in large part due to this failed racist drug policy. So the fact that within a month we're taking two big actions, both at the state level and now locally as we implement this, to begin to repair, is important. There was a New York Times article many years ago, less than 10, that talked about the more than 1 million Black men that have disappeared from their community because of these drug policies, because of early death, because of violence, all things related to disinvestment in education, community, and the like. And so while this, again, won't solve it, it's a signal that we want to make these investments in the right way, and we want to leverage these investments to the other $7.1 billion that we have in the budget to make sure we maximize impact for our communities. Because when you have a strong Black community, when you have a strong community of color, you have a strong Montgomery County, you have a strong state, and that's really important. So I'm really happy to be here to commemorate this and to move this forward. And again, want to thank everyone who was involved and look forward to getting into the teeth of the work. So I'll turn it over to my colleague, Councilmember Sayles. Light clap for her.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today on this very momentous occasion. I want to start by thanking my colleague, Councilmember Mink, for organizing, leading this effort, and ensuring that Montgomery County takes the lead in righting the wrongs of the war on drugs. I proudly signed on to Bill 4-24 because I know how important reinvesting the resources that have not always benefited our community are now going to make an incredible impact. As we all know, in 2022, Maryland voters overwhelmingly voted to legalize cannabis in Maryland, with 67% of voters voting yes on Maryland's question 4. Currently, 24 states, including the District of Columbia, have legalized the recreational use of marijuana. The cannabis industry is fast growing, and the time is now to reap the rewards and financial and medicinal benefits that once criminalized medication disproportionately decimated communities of color. Furthermore, as my colleagues have mentioned, just last month, Governor Moore pardoned over 175 Maryland convictions related to possession of cannabis, including convictions for misdemeanor possession of cannabis and certain convictions for misdemeanor possessions of drug paraphernalia. This monumental decision was celebrated by jurisdictions all across the state of Maryland. These recent actions, including the historic executive order and the introduction of Bill 824, are clear indicators that Maryland residents are ready for sweeping change. Our elected officials are actively listening and calling for reform. On December 1st, 2023, I wrote a letter to Governor Moore, co-signed by our county executive, Mark Elrich, and my colleagues, 8 of my council colleagues, calling for the pardon and the expungement of records for low-level drug offenses in response to the passage of the Cannabis Reform Act. On March 5th, I also introduced Bill 824 on the council. It was approved out of committee with a positive support, which would amend Montgomery County's ban the box legislation, a policy that prohibits employers from asking about an applicant's criminal history on job applications. But this amendment aims to protect renters from having to disclose their criminal history to prospective landlords, a crucial step in ensuring that individuals with past drug convictions are not unfairly discriminated against in housing. The Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee discussed the bill yesterday, and I'm so grateful for their positive support. The push for criminal justice reform continues. This is a step in the right direction, but that's what this is, a first step. As the county's lead for eliminating disparities in public health, I want to reassure you that Montgomery County is focused on rectifying the significant harms caused by the war on drugs. Once again, I'm immensely proud and appreciative of the collective efforts in passing Bill 424, the Community Reinvestment and Repair Fund Commission. This landmark bill ensures the funds from cannabis will directly benefit communities impacted and affected by the war on drugs. I'm dedicated to assembling a robust and diverse coalition of members to serve on this commission to maximize its effectiveness in reinvesting in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmembers Jawando and Sales. And I will note, too, that this is a commission, and we're really looking forward to seeing the applicants come through and making sure that we get the right voices on there to make sure that the impacted community is making the decisions. And I'm phrasing it that way because although in the legislation it says that this is a commission that's making recommendations, I want to be clear that the intent here is that the recommendations that come out of this commission are what is actually done. We want this commission to be deciding how these funds should be distributed and for county government to be following their lead and making sure those funds get there. So that's want to make sure that's stated very clearly. I'm now really honored to have with us today the co-executive director of Racial Justice Now, Mr. Hashim Jabbar. Coming up, Racial Justice Now is an important organization in Montgomery County. They have been instrumental in fighting for forward progress in racial justice in issue areas across the board. And so really appreciate their work on this piece of legislation from the start. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jabbar for a few words.
Peace and blessings. I am Hashim Jabbar, the co-executive director of Racial Justice Now, and we are proud to be leaders in the passage of this bill 424 here in Montgomery, Maryland. I grew up in this great area, the capital region, Washington, D.C., specifically Northeast. And again, we are very proud to be a part of this step in the right direction. Racial Justice Now partners with and organizes across generations of impacted youth, parents, and communities to build and wield people power at the grassroots to advance human rights by challenging systemic anti-Black racism, the criminalization of Black families, and discriminatory policies in education and beyond. In America, in general, the crack cocaine epidemic has conveniently been swept under the rug, is seldom talked about or discussed, despite the supreme egregious act by the highest offices in the land to inject a highly addictive substance, crack cocaine, in the African American and Black populations, Black neighborhoods across America. The war on drugs has devastated communities all across the state of Maryland, and specifically here in Montgomery County. Cannabis prohibition policy played a significant role in over-policing the Black community that fueled mass incarceration. Even though Maryland has legalized recreational cannabis and has taken some steps to address the criminal justice impacts of mass incarceration, the biggest beneficiaries of legalization of a substance that once contributed to the denigration of Black communities are wealthy and mostly white companies. The Reinvestment and Repair Commission, established by this legislation in fulfillment of the mandate from the Community Repair and Reinvestment Fund, is one small but important step in the direction of investing resources directly into the communities most impacted by the war on drugs. There is still much more investment needed in the Black communities and African American communities across the country that are still suffering from the impact of the war on drugs. We hope that this can serve as a catalyst for more investment, direct and specific investment in the Black communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jabbar. Now I'd like to bring up Yannette Emanuel, who is the Public Policy Director of the ACLU of Maryland. They have been instrumental in putting together this legislation at the state level, as well as here at the county level and in other jurisdictions, including Montgomery County. So, Ms. Emanuel.
Good afternoon. My name is Yannette Emanuel, Public Policy Director with the ACLU of Maryland. As it was mentioned, the dangerous war on drugs facilitated the over-policing and mass incarceration of Black and brown people for decades. And as a lifelong Montgomery County resident, I can tell you that I've seen it myself. Back in 2010, Black people were nearly 3 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession, despite lower rates of lifetime usage than white people. Today in Maryland, Black people are more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession, and once arrested, more disproportionately convicted. Once convicted, Black people receive longer sentences than white people for both misdemeanor and felony marijuana offenses. Even post-decriminalization in 2014, 80% of marijuana possession charges were for possession of less than 10 grams. And 54% of those individuals who were charged were Black. The collateral consequences of this targeted over-criminalization has impacted not only the mental, financial, and emotional well-being of the individual that's been impacted, but also their families and communities as well. Recognizing this, we understand that to begin repairing the harm done, Maryland must do more than just legalize the recreational use of marijuana or expunge criminal records, but we must go beyond that and redirect resources back to the community through a reparations framework. This is why the ACLU of Maryland, along with our partners, supported the establishment of the Cannabis Repair and Reinvestment Fund. This provision, as it was mentioned, originated in SB 692, the Cannabis Legalization and Reparations for the War on Drugs Act, sponsored by Senator Jill P. Carter. This fund allocates at least 35% of tax revenue from the new recreational market. Each county, including Baltimore City, will receive a percentage of those funds determined by the jurisdiction's contribution to statewide cannabis-related arrests for the last 20 years. We applaud the council for passing this bill. The Montgomery County Community Repair and Reinvestment Fund is an important step towards repairing the harm done to our communities. And we're just so glad to see that it's passed and hope that other jurisdictions follow suit as well. Thank you.
Thank you. It's now my honor to bring up Courtney Hall of Interfaith Works, who I'm sure, as many of us know, Interfaith Works is on the ground doing work directly with the community, and so can speak certainly to the impacts that we have seen as a result of the war on drugs, as well as the improvements that can be made when we invest wisely in the community. Mr. Hall.
Good afternoon. Thank you, council members, and also to my colleagues. This is a momentous day. Interfaith Works has been supportive of Bill 424, particularly in the ways that it's already been described, to establish the Community Repair Repair Fund Commission. At Interfaith Works, we serve 35,000 people a year who are experiencing poverty. These are all Montgomery County residents. And we have seen an alarming increase in services, which we know has been building for some time. Certainly, we've seen a crushing amount of needs since the pandemic. And we know that as we think about the ways that Black communities in particular have been affected, we know that disproportionate cannabis enforcement is at the root. Our data is showing that particularly for the Black community, we've seen 144% increase in shelter use, 135% increase in folks who are applying and requesting assistance with clothing and other essential needs, and 40% increase for those who are seeking rental and utility assistance. So that just sort of, as Councilmember Mink said, sort of lays the framework, the groundwork for why something like this is really important. I do agree with the comments that have been made earlier that this is one step, just one step, but I think a significant step towards repairing significant harm that's been done to the entire community, but particularly for Black folks. Also, I commend Montgomery County on the Commission's grant-based approach, which I know as the leader of a nonprofit is essential for folks like Interfaith Works, but particularly for many other organizations in Montgomery County to be able to continue the important work that we're doing. I'm really happy to see that there was language that was included that allowed for increased representation on the commission for communities that were most harmed. That was when I gave my testimony, that was the one of the two things that I requested, and I'm happy to see that those amendments were made. The other thing that I would just bring to the fore again, and this is not necessarily associated with the legislation per se, but as a nonprofit leader, I have seen where the county's grant process, the county has made strides towards streamlining that process. And I would like to see, particularly as it relates to this commission, that the county continues to make strides to streamline the process so nonprofits and other organizations, particularly social justice organizations, which typically don't have strong bases of funding, that they are able to quickly access this $1 million that has already been allocated for this year. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. That was very diplomatic. We've got a lot of work to do getting grant money out the doors faster. And absolutely, this is certainly a bucket of funding that we do not want to see sitting around. And we were very conscious in our drafting of this, and many thanks to the advocates for making sure that we had eyes on this too, to make sure that the commission has as few limits as possible in terms of being able to think creatively about where these funds should go. So we've got the nonprofit community, but this could also go into private spaces, this could go into to neighborhood groups. So we really want to make sure that we get the right people on the commission who will have a racial justice lens and can think creatively about what would best serve the community. There are social services. There are also, business and entrepreneurship. There's a lot of different angles that the commission could take with this, and very much look forward to seeing what they come up with. At this time, we're going to open it up to questions. We just have a couple of minutes, but if there's any questions, we're available. All right. Yeah, we got it done. Good job, everybody. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.